Hello and welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast. I'm your host, Josh Holleran, and today we are joined by Iain Mackenzie, a recently qualified driving instructor or ADI. In today's episode, Iain talks about his qualifying process and the reasons he became a driving instructor. There was a light bulb moment for me in this episode around the part 3 and how we maybe prepare for it, or how we think we're preparing for the part 3. So some really interesting topics covered in today's episode, from why he came into the industry, what transferable skills he was bringing into the industry, how that worked and how that fit into the process, and what changes he had to make for his third part 3 attempt, which he passed and is now qualified. So I really hope you enjoy this episode and get something from it. If you would like to keep up to date with the show, you can find me on Facebook at Mirror's Signal Podcast. We also have a group where if you've got any questions or you'd like advice from some of the great people that are in the group, just head over there. And make sure that you hit subscribe or follow wherever you are listening or watching the show. So we will get on with the episode. I hope you all enjoy.
Iain, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you for inviting me.
That's all right. It's been a bit delayed, this episode. We were supposed
Yeah,
to
it was, isn't
film
it? Yeah,
a few
yeah,
months ago, wasn't we?
yeah.
Apologies. I
No,
decided to
it's not a problem.
disappear for a few
Absolutely not a
months.
problem. Not a problem. I understand you taking a break. I understand you want a wee break from it all, even though you didn't really get it.
Yeah, well, no, we just ended up doing other things. But
Yeah,
not
it's always
to
the way.
worry about that. We're back here. We're back where we started, talking to people that have recently qualified, sharing their journey to hopefully help
Mhm.
you guys that are listening that want to become a driving instructor and getting some first-hand experience. So why don't we start there? How was your journey to become a driving instructor?
I've really enjoyed it. It's been a challenge, but I've really enjoyed it. Um, it's sort of what happened was I worked for Tesco before, and a big part of my job there was a trainer, but I was on what they called an old contract. It was worth a lot of money. So they tried to fire and rehire us. So while they were stuck in court in the process, they offered me redundancy. So at first I'm sticking my heels and I'm like, no, I'm not moving, I'm not moving, I'm on a good contract. But then I was thinking, well, is there something else I could be doing? A big part of my job was a trainer. I was an on-site trainer. So I could take you into that warehouse and train you on any piece of machinery you wanted, to do any job you wanted, forklifts, everything. So I liked doing that. Is there anything I could do outside? And I was looking at trainers' jobs and forklifts and other warehouse, and I thought, I've done that. Then I was on Indeed, and it popped driving instructor. I thought, oh, okay, that might be worth a look at. So I just Googled it, and it came up. Am I allowed to mention the school?
Um, yeah, if we're gonna complain about them, if it's good, if it's all good stuff, yeah. If it's not, we'll just say
Yeah,
nah.
it's fairly good. There's nothing. I've got no problem really. There's one wee incident I do have a problem, but we'll leave that out, or you can edit that out.
Oh, we'll edit the school out and you can give us all the gory
Okay.
details.
Well, I'll leave the school's name out of it then. So I phoned up the school, and within 20 minutes, I had somebody on the phone giving me information about everything, about the money you could earn, about the training process, what you have to go through. And it seemed quite interesting. And a lot of it related back to when I went on a 2-week course to do my forklift training. You know, your open questions, things like this. So I thought, okay. So I had a talk with the other half, and she was like, just, it's up to you. She wouldn't make the decision, it's up to you. But I think deep down inside, she wanted me to go, because I was working night shift, constant night shift. And she wanted me off that, I think. She wanted me in the home at night and, doing a better job. So I just went for it. I thought, right, let's take my redundancy, pay my training fees up front, let's go in, all in. So I did that. Yeah, it was good. I've enjoyed every bit of it. every bit of it. So that's how I came to actually picking that job. That's how I picked the job.
So what I would like to, before we talk about the training, because I think it'll be interesting to go through each of the part 1 through to part 3 tests. But thinking back to that initial phone call where you maybe spoke to a trainer or spoke to a salesperson, whatever the school was, on reflection.
I can't remember who it was. I can't remember who it was. I don't think it was a salesperson. I think it was somebody higher up. I can't remember his name. It's gone. It's gone.
Well, with that kind of conversation and that phone call, jumping forward to where you are now, is it an accurate reflection based on what they told you on that initial consultation and you having been done the job now for about 6 months? Is it what you expected at that stage?
I would have to say it was. I would have to say it was. I love getting up in the morning and going out and doing my job. And that's the kind of feel I got from what they were telling me. Yeah, I would have to say it was quite accurate.
So what brought you to this industry?
Sorry?
What pulled you to this industry? Because that's interesting. You had the sales pitch, whatever it is, and you're saying, yep, this is now what I'm doing full time. What was it that brought you to do this job?
The fact that I enjoyed the training in the warehouse. Years ago, they offered me redundancy, but I never took it. And I sort of thought about it then. Somebody else was thinking about it at the same time. It was in the same situation. So I sort of thought about it then. And it's something that I don't know. So, yeah, I think it's just a link in the training. I enjoyed the training. Here's another training job. There's a chance to earn good money, work for myself. That interested me a lot, although it was a wee bit scary for me. But I think being self-employed, helping people to drive, that's, I think, what pulled me towards it.
That's a really interesting answer, and that was kind of what I was expecting, and I think it's really important for people that are listening that are aware of that, because a lot of people come into it because they've been driving for a long time, and it's I can drive, so let's go and be a driving instructor. But it's not a driving job. It's a teaching, a coaching, and instructing job where we're developing people and primarily teenagers. And then the other thing that often gets overlooked, so we can maybe touch on it, is you're self-employed. You're running your own business.
Yeah.
It's a big jump, a big risk, a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And quite challenging at times. How have you found that? Now you're full-time as an ADI. How have you found the business side of it?
Fine. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying working for myself. I'm enjoying taking time off when I want. I mean, there's me and my partner sat down Christmas, New Year, and we booked a holiday for the end of January, end of January. So I'm just booked the week off in my diary, and that's me. I'm away on holiday. Before I would have to fill in forms and get permission and all this blah blah blah. It's so much easier. The bookkeeping side of it, I'm sort of keeping on top of. I could always do that better, I think. Occasionally I find a couple of weeks, especially after Christmas, you're having to catch up in 2 weeks worth of work or receipts or whatever. I think the hardest part is managing my diary the way I want it. I think that's the hardest part because I've got people from one end of Dundee to the other end of Dundee, and sometimes I'm at one end of Dundee 1 hour and then I'm away at the other the next, and it's just, I think that's the challenging bit, managing your diary the way you want it. But as far as working for myself, I'm really enjoying it. It's been a great move for me, I think. Actually, one of my pupils is a self-employed cleaner, and the two of us spend a lot of lessons just talking about being self-employed. So it's she's enjoying it as well. So yeah, it's quite good. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. It is a challenge, and it is scary when you've been employed all your life and people's looked after your tax and your days off and your rota, and now you've got to do it all yourself. But it's if you get it, it's easy. It's not easy, but it makes it easier. It makes it more enjoyable.
think the biggest challenge, and I've mentioned this so many times on the podcast, it's that diary management. I get my diary perfect. I get it to where I want to be working, doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then someone will be like, oh, I can't do this time anymore. And I
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, let's see if we can squeeze you in. And that's where I'm at the minute. My diary is all over the place again. I've got half a day off here, half a day off there. I can't fill it because in 2 weeks' time it changes again.
Yeah.
And I'll get it good, probably late February, early March. I'll be like, right, this is my working week. And then by the end of March, come the end of the financial year when I'm trying to fill the diary again, it'll all go out the window
Yeah.
and I'll repeat the cycle.
Yeah. It's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. I mean, I spoke to other instructors in the area. A lot of people who I went through the qualifying process with, and they're going through the same thing. The diary, I think, is your hardest thing to manage. It's also people just cancel, and that's your day ruined. You're trying to fill that gap, and you fill it with that gap with maybe somebody the other end of Dundee. So you spend the whole day just running about. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is. I wish, and there probably is, if I was more business mind and less wanting to help people, I could probably just be more straight down the line.
See, if I was to stop being so nice, my diary would be easier. But I just can't do it. I'm in a fortunate position where every one of my pupils I actually like. I get on really well with them, so I'm really enjoying it. So if they come up and say, "Oh, I can't do it this time, could I do this time?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, we'll just do that." And it's just my days all over the place. But it's that's the only downfall, I think. That's the hardest part, is doing your diary.
The way I kind of see that now is like some days are really long, some days are quite short at the minute. But it comes back to like what you were saying. You've taken the end of January off to go away with you and your wife. And I think that's almost like we have to have busy days and days where we're all over because we know, well, if I want to take a week off, I kind of need money in the bank because I'm not going to be paid this week. So we've got to take the rough with the smooth. I don't have to ask anyone for holidays, but I might be spending 2 days a week where I'm working more than ideally I want to be.
Yeah. Like next week, I'm working till 7:30 at night. That's unheard of. But I know I've got this holiday coming up, and this guy asked for 2 hours, and I'm like, okay, I'll fit you in.
It's almost long-term planning.
But then I'll go back to the pupil. I like the guy, so it's not a chore. This is what I'm finding the most enjoyable thing about this. My job's not a chore. If my job gets stressful, I find I'm doing something wrong. The lessons at the wrong place, the wrong pace. Yeah.
And I think that's where you need to find the balance in the lesson with the learner, where you're not chasing your tail.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But if you can get that balance, then the job's great.
It is. So we spoke about the job, about diary management and the ever-ending struggle that is. But let's go back to your training and we'll go back to the beginning if you can remember kind of how that was. So if we start at part 1, did you pass it first time? How was that?
No, I was actually second time. My first time, I failed it by one question. You know, you've got your 4 sections, your 5 sections. Every one you've got to score 20.
Yep.
So I had 25, 24, blah, 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 and one of them was 19. All the rest were over, and I was gutted. I was absolutely distraught. I was really annoyed with myself. I'd put in the work, I don't know what I'd done. I actually walked out the DVSA test centre and I was trying to book a test for like an hour later or something so I could run sit it again, but obviously I couldn't do it. But I got one a week later or 2 weeks later and I passed that, no problem.
So you say you put the work in for the part 1. What did that consist of? Because the pass rate for the part 1 at the minute is not great. And I think a lot of people are struggling.
Yeah.
How did you manage studying for it?
I was unemployed at the time. I'd taken redundancy. So I had time to put the work in. So I set aside for this part 1, I set a couple of hours every day and I would just do that. That's all I done. So it was probably a little bit easier for me. I understand it might be more difficult for people that are training part-time. But I had time to put in for it. I had an app called Driving Test Success Anytime, which I got through the company that I'd paid for. So I just used that, and I read all the questions, I revised them all. I was on the highway code, all the books they gave us, like the essential skills, things like this. I was reading all that.
And that's
And the
really
second,
important for a lot of people, is getting that study time in. I didn't. I've been quite honest about it at the time. I was just like, my first one, I basically rocked up having done next to no study and failed it, surprisingly. And I thought it was the test and I'd pass it second time, and I didn't pass it second time. So I
right,
actually
okay.
studied and took it all in for my third attempt and passed that one. So I think it is important for people
It
that
really
are
is. It
getting
really
ready.
is. This is what I tell all my pupils that are maybe not struggling with theory, but they're starting their theory. If you put half an hour to an hour aside every day to do your theory, in a few weeks' time, you'll have that. You'll be confident enough to go and sit it. But it's getting them off their PlayStations, off Facebook or TikTok, whatever they're on. It's getting them off that. I've got so many pupils that are coming up to being test ready, and they've not passed their theory yet. There's at least 2 or 3 anyway. But I
I've
try to set
started
them
doing
homework now.
go on.
I try to set them homework now. So I'm asking them road signs, I'm asking them rules for the road, and say, right, come back with the answer for that next week.
I've been doing a lot more in car with the theory tests for my learners, because it does seem a little bit like you just seem to put it off and put it off.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're like, I'm waiting till I get paid next week. I'm waiting till I get paid the week after. And I almost scratch my head. I'm like, you're paying me 3 times more for this lesson than what your theory test is going to
Doesn't
cost
make
you.
sense. Doesn't make
So
sense.
just skip a lesson. Just skip a lesson and go and book it.
Yeah,
Have a shorter lesson,
it really
but get
doesn't
it
make
booked.
sense. Doesn't make sense. Put the work in, you'll get it. And that's a theme
Let's
we're going to hear a lot in my training process.
put the work in. And do you know, you said you was unemployed at the time, or whatever transition you was going through, so you had time. But I think when we look at how much time we waste, and that was something that I done when I was on my break from the podcast, where yeah, I was working, I was working on other things. I watched quite a bit more TV and a little more just doing nothing, and it wasn't productive. So we're back. We've
Well,
started the podcast
I
again.
found when I first started, I found a bit of the problem. A lot of my hazard perception was done on Gran Turismo. I would spend a couple of hours and I'm just playing PlayStation or doing something else. So I had a lot of time to waste. So I had time to do the work. So
And
the
if it's
reason I
something
failed
that we
first time,
want,
I've no excuse for failing first time. I really haven't.
there we go. It can happen to all of us. But it is a great message. And I think if it's something you want to do, putting the work in at part one will pay dividends later on. And
Of
that's
course I will.
something that
What I try,
stay tuned
what I
to what
try
I'm
to
up
tell my
to.
pupils is, sorry, I'm interrupting you. Sorry,
That's all right. Go on. You
what I
tell your
try to tell you,
pupils.
I tell your pupils that your theory will help you with driving, and your driving's going to help you with your theory. So do both at the same time. Keep working at them both.
They interlink, don't they? One of
Of
my
course they do.
lessons today,
Of course.
what was we talking about? I can't remember what it was, but it was like, well, if you're studying for your theory test, because he's not been, we'd have been able to establish the rule in this situation so that you can apply it on the road and we can make
Yeah,
sense of it theoretically.
yeah,
And he's now studying his theory test, apparently, this evening.
yeah.
But it makes so much sense. So you put the work in at part one, you had time. I think we can all make time if it's something that we want to do. You can
Of course that's
definitely like an hour a day. You can find that if you're dedicated to becoming a driving instructor. But we'll fast forward to your part two. How did your part two preparation and the test go?
So the preparation was done with an excellent instructor, an audit trainer I had called Willie Nimmo. He was absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I actually flew through my part two, no problem. First time. I didn't have a ball. I was actually really confident going into it. We spent 2 or 3 lessons just going through everything. Of course, I rocked up in the car and I thought I was a great driver. Within 5 minutes, Willie had picked me to pieces in a good way. But that was a good thing about Willie. But yeah, so I just worked on that. I mean, the amount of times I've driven up and down the dual carriageway doing these roundabouts, make sure my mirrors are right, my signals are right, changing gear at the right time. That's another thing I put in the time doing on my own without my trainer. I'd go out in the car, go up and down roads, practice turning junctions, just put in a simple wee practice like that. And it helped us massively. Again, there you go, I've put in the work and I passed first time.
What changes did you have to make with your driving when you got picked apart? What were some of the more obvious changes that you had to make?
Gear changing. Instead of battering up to junctions in third gear, come down the gears. Speed on approach. That was a big one. Mirrors. Timing of my signals on roundabouts. That was a massive one. That was a big one.
Was that timing of your signals on roundabouts, or was that actually signalling off roundabouts?
Yeah, pretty much timing signals coming into the roundabout and coming off them. Putting on a signal coming off them would be a better way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't great. Speed and approach. I mean, I approach things way too fast. Way too fast. And of course, that doesn't give you time to do everything. So that was the first thing I had to look at. But I think I got it quite quickly. Check your mirrors. You know, and I always say to a lot of my pupils, they're good at checking their mirrors at junctions, at roundabouts, but it's just things in between, passing parked cars, speeding up, slowing down. This is, we've got to check my mirrors there. That was another big thing. I had no idea you had to, when you're speeding up, you had to check your mirrors. What for? Well, it's like, no. You have to do that. But
It's
yeah,
interesting, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was good. I enjoyed it. And I loved my training with him because although he would pick you apart, he'd done it in a really good way. But it was good. But I caught on pretty quick to that. And again, the time I spent just travelling up and down the road, doing junctions, doing roundabouts, just practicing myself, that helped me massively. Massively.
What was one thing my trainer told me when I'd done my part 2 training? It was like a 2-day intensive that I'd done. And he said, this is how you need to drive now, everywhere. It's like, don't just drive like this for me. It's like, this is now how you drive as an instructor, as a person. This is how you drive, all the time. And out of my test to become a driving instructor, that was the only one that I passed first time. So the work paid off on that front.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And that's just what I done. I mean, my partner, Anne, she noticed the difference in my driving because I was having to do it. And she's watching the videos and she's like, I don't do that either. I was like, you'll be my first pupil.
If that's anything like my relationship, that probably didn't go down too well.
Anne's been really supportive of me. She's been great all the way along. But she was looking at some of the videos I was watching about driving, changing gears, stuff like that. That's actually really hard to do because I've been doing it the wrong way for a long time. So hence, this is why I just went round in circles, round doing junctions, round doing roundabouts. Spent a lot of time doing that. But it paid off.
So that was how you spent your time preparing for your part 2. You'd had your training with your trainer, and then you was just taking yourself out in the car and working on the skills that your trainer had told you needed to develop.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it paid off. It paid off. I was coming up to my part 3. On the days leading up to it, I was quite nervous about it because obviously you're sitting your driving test again. And obviously it's a longer driving test. It's a stricter driving test. But actually, when I woke up on the day, I felt really confident about it. I actually couldn't wait to get it done and get on to the next stage.
I had some nerves on mine, but a long story condensed massively. I picked the car up about an hour and a half before my part 2,
right,
in a town that I've never been to. So I'd done a test somewhere that I'd never been to in a car that I
Right.
drove about an hour and a half before. So I was very nervous, but it all worked in my favor because I was confident with my driving ability. I had to be on the ball with the car in an unfamiliar area. So I couldn't get complacent. I had
Yeah.
to focus for about
Concentrate.
an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah.
You were switched on. You were switched on. You were focused on it. You knew you had to
Yeah.
be.
And it worked. It certainly paid off all of the hours that I was doing again, driving around. And I was using it because I'm in Swindon. I am not originally from Swindon. So I just used to commute in and commute out. And
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, let's be a driving instructor in this town that I don't know. So a lot of my part two, when I was kind of preparing for it, I was learning the area as well. I was like, let's
Yeah.
go and find a
Yeah.
few areas, see what's going on. So I was becoming more familiar with the roads, but I was doing it to prepare for my part two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there we go. Top tip so far for both tests has been put the work in. Get quality training, put the work in.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the thing. It's this theme all the way through this. You'll get out of this what you put into it.
Absolutely. So let's move towards the one that I'm sure everyone wants to hear about. Part three. We'll start.
Yeah.
How was your part three test? Let's go there.
The first one.
First one. Let's start with the first one.
Okay. So I went into it feeling actually quite confident. I'd had tests passing. I was doing well. I was great. The girl I used, she was a good driver. I communicated well with her. The training beforehand had gone really well with Willie. It was going well, but then Willie retired. And we were sort of caught in a bit between having Willie in and getting the new trainer in. So there's a wee blank space there where we didn't really have a trainer. But I was confident. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I know what I'm going to do for a lesson. I'm going to do country roads. We'll do rural roads. She's a good driver. She'll manage it, no problem. Turned up at the test centre. The examiner came out, done his thing, looked at my stuff, got in the car. She clipped a curb coming out the test centre. So I tried to ask her a question about it, and then she stopped me and says, "Right, where are we going now?" There's my directions gone. Then she clipped the next corner. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't have gone any worse. It was an absolute nightmare. So I pulled her into a wee industrial estate. I talked to her about stuff, and this usually chatty girl all of a sudden couldn't talk. She just couldn't talk, and I felt so bad for her. And I'm trying to encourage her. I'm trying to get it out of her and try to ask her about cutting the curb and what he could have done better and all this stuff. And she's sitting there, I don't know. I really don't know. I goes, let's go for a drive and let's calm you down a wee bit. And what I did for the next half hour is get her to drive round the industrial estate. She was doing it well, but I didn't push her on. I didn't adapt the lesson. I didn't advance her. I didn't draw back my instruction. I just left her driving around. Back to the test centre. No, absolute disaster. I actually, the guy got in the car. The guy's name was Andy Morton, a really nice guy. And he sat in the car. He goes, well, what do you think? And I sat and told him all this. I sat and told him everything. He's like, what do you need me for? I'm like, okay. And that was that. That was test one. Failed.
Why did that happen? What caused it?
I wasn't ready. I did all the work I'd done for my part one and my part two. I'd done very little work for my part three. I'd done all my training, all the stuff that was in the syllabus, so to speak, from the company. I'd done all that, but I'd done nothing extra. I didn't push myself. I didn't challenge myself. I didn't get people watching me what I was doing, because we had this wee blank space where we had no trainer. I'm not blaming that at all. That was down to me. I'd had enough training to do better than that anyway. I just wasn't ready. Wasn't ready.
That's interesting. Did you think you was ready? Was it a case of I've had some driving test passes, I can do this? So you at the time thought you was ready, and then
Yeah.
once you got your feedback, I assume, from the examiner,
Yeah,
did it make sense at that point as to what had happened and
absolutely.
why?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd had tests. I don't think up until that point, I mean, we're talking maybe 3 months. I could be wrong about that. Whatever the period of time from when I got my pink license to my part three, I seem to remember I had no fails at all. Everyone had passed their test. And I think that was a bad thing for me. I think I could have done with some fails going in there. Maybe I was a little bit overconfident. Dare I say a little cocky? Maybe. I'm not a cocky person. I never am, but maybe I was there. I don't know. Just looking back now, I'm thinking about that. Yeah, I definitely did more work. I'd not even read a book. I mean, I read the essential skills when I needed it to look up something or sort of reference it. Never read anything.
Why did this happen in preparation for your part three? So you've said how much work you put in for part one, how much work you put in for part two. What changed after part two and
I,
preparing for your part three?
I thought I was working by working on the pink license. I thought I was doing okay because people were passing tests. I thought, well, they're
So,
passing tests. I must be doing something right.
so you're putting the work in for your first part three was teaching driving lessons,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they was passing their driving tests. So you're like, I've got this.
Yeah.
Because I think this is really interesting. You get so many PDIs that are confused. They're like, I've got all of these students that have passed their driving test, but I've just failed my second part three.
Yeah.
And they assume it's the system and the part three test that's wrong. So it's fascinating to see that you was gauging your instructing or your instructional ability on your students passing
Yeah.
their driving test. So it's really interesting to discuss this and see that for people listening, perhaps putting in driving lessons and putting all the work into your students and your effort into your students is maybe not the best preparation for a part three.
No.
So what changed after it?
Well, I had my second attempt. Obviously, I was disappointed, but I wouldn't have said gutted because I've got another 3 terms left. I'll get it next time. I think the biggest thing for the second one was getting people sitting in the back, watching what I was doing. That was a massive thing for my second one. But again, what I did was I left it too late to fix all the problems I had. Remember, I talked about me being a trainer, forklift trainer specifically. We used a lot of open questions there, but we had a week to train them. So if they weren't getting these questions, we just told them the answer. So that was a big problem for me, telling people what to do, helping people, instead of letting them learn it. Instead of, how's it Bob Morton puts it, get the learning out of them. Never done it. I would be telling a lot of the time. That was a big, big, big thing for me. And I put it down to the fact the way I used to train the forklift. You only had a week. And on the fifth day of that week, you had to test them. So you've not got all this time that you've got being a driving instructor. The second attempt, it was better, but I failed again. But this was I'll come to how I felt about it in a minute, but I was doing better. I was doing better in my questions, but it wasn't great. I was telling a lot of people what to do. I got people in the back watching what I was doing. And that was the big thing. But the problem for me was I'd done it too late. I'd done it with maybe 1 or 2 weeks to go before my part 3. And it's not enough time to sort it. I just didn't leave myself enough time. I should have done it earlier. So I went into my part 3 and I actually failed it on my risk management this time because I should have stopped her at a roundabout when I didn't. Now, it was a close one. Even now, I still think it was a close one. I agree with the examiner. I should have stopped her. She came to the junction. She went to move off, and all of a sudden, this car came out from the other junction. Now, I should have stopped her, but he caught up pretty quickly. I agree. I should have stopped her, but I didn't. And also, the lesson theme was wrong. I didn't identify her needs. That was the big thing on that one. Where I was doing lane position on roundabouts, the examiner highlighted that our MSPSL was out of time, wasn't timed properly. I would give her a direction, let's say we're going to turn left, first exit, and she'd sort of stare, and then she'd check her mirrors. And it was that much out, but he noticed it. He noticed it was out, and that would have helped her with her lane position and her whole roundabouts and her judgment. And yeah, that was what I failed on second time. Again, the feedback I got for the examiner was brilliant. I think I sat in it was about half an hour sitting in the car with him. It was great with his feedback. A guy called Malcolm this time. Yeah, so that's the way the second one went. I just left myself too late to fix everything. I don't know why I left it so long. To this day, I don't know why I left it so long. Well, maybe I do actually. I don't. No, I don't. I think I had too many pupils at the time, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I mean, that's just me thinking about that just now. Just sitting thinking about it with you. I think I had too many pupils and I was too busy.
So where was your time for your studying, your putting your work in?
Yeah, that was it. That was it. Looking back at it now, yeah,
Do,
it
do you
didn't help
think
anyway.
that could be, do you think that could be why the pass rate is 35%? Because you can't be on your own. We take our first part 3 because we've had a load of driving test passes. So we take our first part 3 and we fail it. And often it's not a drastic fail. It's maybe 2 or 3 points away from the pass mark. So we almost think, well, I'll get it next time. And I've got all of these students. I can't let these students down. And now I've got a gap, so I'll get someone to watch 1 or 2 of my lessons because I've got my part 3 in a couple of weeks. Some changes that need to be made, but we've not got time to solidify our skills as an instructor. So we fail the second one. Now we're on our last one.
The dreaded third.
But your priority has to change now, doesn't it? It
And it
can't
did.
be about your pupils anymore.
It did change. Everything changed. The third, after I failed the second one, my confidence got hit really badly. Really badly. It took me a long time to get that up again. So what I decided, I actually considered quitting. Briefly. But I talked myself out of it. I thought, no, I'm enjoying this, so let's get through this, let's work harder. The first decision I made was get my confidence back up, get back out teaching again, which I did. I started keeping a reflective log. That was a big difference. That was something, that was a good thing to do, a reflective log. Now, I did it, I think I started off doing one after every week. Then the closer it got to my part 3, it was like every lesson I was doing a reflective log. Some people said it was too much. It maybe was, but it worked. I also had another trainer come down from Aberdeen, a guy called Doug Farquhar, who again was really good. He was really good. Spent a lot of time with him. He was sitting in the back. He was watching my lessons. There's wee comments here and there he could do, but generally, I think his biggest thing was getting my confidence back up. He goes, "You're doing well. You're teaching well. Just keep doing that." Podcasts. Books. That's another thing that changed for my third attempt. Podcast, the instructor podcast and your own podcast were two ones were playing religiously in my car. Religiously. Between every lesson. If I had 10 minutes before my next lesson, I was driving there. Standards checklist was on it. Going through everything. Being better with Bob, there's another one. That was all those were on it. Reading books, Untwisting the Road to Success. That was one really good book. I'm not one for reading books. I've not got the patience for reading books. But this one's got wee videos. You can read the book, and if you're not getting it, watch the video. I thought it was really good, and I've still got that in my car to this day. So that changed for my second part 3. What else did I change? A reflective log, podcasts, religiously, books, studying, watching videos on, what's his name? How to Drive. What's the guy's?
Floyd.
That's it. Watching his videos of the part 3 test. That was another thing I did. I'd done Bob Morton's course, online course. Actually, I'd done it a couple of times. That was really good. And getting people in the car a lot earlier. I didn't even have a test date, and I had people sitting in the back of my car this time. And they were picking up the faults, picking up things I should be doing better. They're not being brutal. They're being really nice about it. They're all friends. A couple of them have been on your show. And just sitting watching what I was doing. And in turn, I would watch them as well, because they all had part 3s coming up as well. That's another thing that helped me, sitting watching other people doing their lessons. So I sort of, people would watch my lessons, I would watch their lessons. Helped massively. But this was done earlier on. As soon as I got a test date, it became 2 different people a week in the back of my car watching my lessons. 2 weeks before, it was 3 people. But the big difference was, I think I had the people picked out early. It was somebody that really I could talk to a lot. I could quiz them on questions. It was somebody that would ask me questions. It was somebody that was, see if he wasn't happy with his junctions, he wanted to go back and do them again. He would ask me to do it. Massive difference. Massive difference. The lesson, I knew roughly where he would be. I knew roughly what we would be doing on a part 3. And it turned out I timed it pretty much right. Just everything fell into place because I put in the work. There's that theme again.
It's fascinating. And just hearing that story, I expect you're not on your own. And there has to be some connection, because the pass rate's around 35% for part 3, which means on average people are passing their 3rd attempt. And I can't see how what you've done being any drastically different to what a lot of people will do. They'll do the part 1, they've put the work in, they'll do well and they'll pass it. Same with part 2, they'll do all right, they'll pass it. They'll pass with 2 or 3 driver faults, and it's like, right, I'm a pretty good driver now. Do the 40 hours training. And if it's a PDI license and you're on a franchise, there's overheads that you've got. So you've got to work, you've got to earn a living. So you've got all of these students and they're passing. So it's like, well, I've got a full diary.
Sorry to interrupt, but you talked about students there. On the lead up to it, maybe 2 months before my part 3, anyone that passed the test, I didn't replace. So I started cutting down my students as well.
For your final one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started cutting down the students as well. He wasn't a lot. I had a few left, but not many. Not many. I think there was maybe 5. I had 5 pupils by the time I came to my part 3. I could be wrong about that number, but it was about as low as that. That was the other big thing, because it gave me time to think. It gave me time to read my reflective log, do the podcast, whatever. And that was the thing. Yeah, I took a hit.
Mm-hmm.
But it was worth it. It's 100% worth it.
That's it. And I can't imagine you're on your own. And I suspect there's lots of PDIs or now qualified ADIs that had a similar situation. They just first one, thought they got unlucky, missed it by a couple of marks. They'll get it the second time. Don't really change an awful lot. Maybe, I don't know, read a couple of books, have someone sitting on your lesson a couple of times, go through the motions of extra training. And then that one doesn't go to plan because you do the same thing you've done on the first one generally.
Exactly.
And then now it's real. You're on your last attempt.
The dreaded
And I
third.
think this is
And
a fascinating message for people.
the thing with the third is it doesn't much matter how much work you put in, how confident you're feeling, how prepared you are. One mistake, that's it. And this is why I upped the level of people sitting in the back put me under pressure. Because there was things went wrong in my part 3, but I was on top of it. Everyone I nailed. I adapted the lesson. He was doing lane position on a big roundabout in Dundee. And he was getting his lane position, but he went to drive through a red light. So I pulled over, talked about it, immediately adapted the lesson. You're getting your lanes now. Can you do that on your own? Yeah. Right, I'll help you with the lights. You need help with the lights? Yeah. So I'll help them with the lights. And there you go. There's your adaptation. It doesn't need to be a big adaptation. Yeah, there was things went wrong, got too close to cars, things like this, but everything I was on it. And I barely even noticed the examiner in the back. And that was a big difference. My second one, I can hardly remember it. It was just a blur. I felt calm going up to the test centre. My second attempt, as soon as I got in the car, bang, and that's it over. I'm like, it was a blur. I felt so much pressure.
My first one. I remember my first one. That's not a blur. I wish it was a blur. It was terrible. But
Yeah.
We're not here for my failings.
Yeah. It was, but that's the work I put in my part 3, and it was actually hearing one of your guests speaking. How much work he put in. He passed second time, and I know the guy. He's from Dundee as well. And I realised I'd done next to nothing. Next to nothing. Listening to what he had done to pass his. So there you go. Your podcast helped as well.
That's why we started it. But it's great you've now got the experience of those different outcomes. You've put the work in, but it's effort that's not gone to you, it's gone to your pupils. So you probably was putting loads of work in to get the drivers through.
The telling thing stopped. When I done Bob Morton's course, it was something I always get the learning out of them. That's stuck in my head. Get the learning out of them. And see the difference in your pupils when you actually do that. They become interested. They're becoming wanting to do it. And that sort of helped me as well. Seeing the difference. It maybe started with 1 or 2 pupils. There was others I couldn't do it with. But gradually I got round to them and seeing the difference in your pupils. That's another thing that changed. That's another thing that changed. Get the learning out of them. I'll always remember that phrase.
Was that a difference on your part 3? Obviously, your preparation for it, but the way, the dynamic in the car, the way you guys were communicating, do you think that made a difference overall on the part 3 as well?
Yes, because I was doing it every day. I was doing it every day. It wasn't unnatural. Especially with the guy I took. He was great with questions. He would ask me questions. I would sometimes turn them around and fire them back at him, and we had a good rapport. But all my pupils were like that. Towards my last part 3, I was good with my questions. I had people sitting in the back, and they were all saying the change you're making is massive, so much more positive. Everyone's better. Just do that on your part 3. And that's all you have to do. But in the back of your head is this thing saying, 1 mistake, that's you. You're back in a warehouse.
I think we're quite fortunate though, aren't you? You're right, it's one mistake, but you said something that stuck out a moment ago, and that was you can make a mistake, but it's how you then deal with that
Yeah,
mistake and
absolutely.
keeping you cool. Because it's not like a driving test where if we have one serious fault in the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes, that's you failed and everything else
Yeah,
could have been perfect, but you failed on that one thing. With a part three, if we can keep a cool, we can
yeah.
make mistakes. Our students can make
Of course,
mistakes.
of course, of
It's
course.
how we manage it.
How we deal with it. How we deal with it. And that was a big thing because even when people sitting in the back, people were making mistakes, and I'd pull them over at the right moment and quiz them better about it, ask them more questions. I'd even reverse it around. Well, what would happen if you were that car and you pulled out in front? Somebody pulled out in front of you. How would you feel? Do you think we've made them feel that way? And just everything was so much more positive, so much more positive. And that was my biggest change. And then seeing the difference in their pupils when you're doing that with them, because they get excited about it. They're more interested about it. They're saying, right, can we go around and see if I can do that better now? Of course we can. Of course we can. And that's especially with the guy I took, Ben, his name was. He's passed his test now. He was like that. Anything that went wrong, he was wanting to fix it. I remember it was like a week before his test, or was it the lesson before his test? He wanted to go back and work on moving off quickly. That's the type of guy he was. And of course, he passed his test, no problem at all. He put the work in.
So we had one lap. So, well, I mean, I wouldn't even say you didn't put the work in. It was maybe just misdirected, which I think is important for our listeners. You can feel like you've put in the work in by having
Yeah,
a full diary, and it's
I
just
would say
misdirected effort potentially.
I would say a bit of both. My first part three and my second part three, I didn't put the work in. But the work I did put in, yeah, maybe misdirected. Yeah, you're right. The second time, I changed everything, and that's my advice to everyone. Forget about the money, forget about your pupils, concentrate on you. Make sure you're doing it every week, every lesson, and when you come at your part three, you'll get through it. I'm need to remember this. I've got a standards check coming up now.
Have you got one? Have they
Yeah,
offered you one?
yeah.
I need to move up north. I've been trying to get one and can't.
We've recently had one of the examiners in Dundee went through our training to become an engagement officer or senior examiner, whatever they call them now. So they're firing out I think that in our group chat, there's maybe 4 people got standards checks now.
She fancies coming further south.
I'll give
I'll
it a
be in
try.
their email list again soon. So when's that? Is that coming up
It's
in the
in the
near
next.
future?
It's February.
Cool.
So what I
So
did was when I booked it, I thought I'm not gonna book it as soon as I can because I'm not stressing about it. I'm not going to book it as soon as I can. I'm going to give myself time to work on it. So I booked it as far away as I could.
to get the preparation in,
Yeah, exactly. Put the
put the
work in.
work in.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you to kind of give us some advice on what you would tell people who are starting the journey, but I think the message that you've got across throughout all of this has been really interesting and people can take so much from it. Is there any other kind of tips or pointers you'd like to give people based on your journey?
I would say that if you're signing with a big national company or a wee company, the stuff they give you is the bare minimum. It's the bare minimum to do your part 3. There's books out there, there's videos, there's podcasts like yourselves, Terry Cooks, there's online courses. You need to put in more work. You need to do more so you're more comfy with your part 3. You're teaching better lessons, and then you'll become more comfy with your part 3. I should have said it that way. Yeah, just put in the work. The biggest thing for me, I think, was all the friends I've got here that are going through this. We've got a group chat with 4, 5, 6 people, and they've all sat in the back watching my lessons. giving me criticism, giving me praise, that's helped massively. Just putting you under that pressure, having you teaching a lesson with somebody watching you. That's, I think, the biggest thing for me. So go into your test centre, there'll be ADIs there, probably in the same position as whoever's listening to this. Talk to them. See if they want to buddy up with you. Watch each other's lessons. Take your mind off how many pupils you've got, how much money you're wanting to make. Concentrate on your part 3. Then the money will come in. I've been there.
A
I've
great
done
message.
it. You don't want this dreaded third attempt.
Well, that must amplify the pressure tenfold. It's like it has to happen on this one, otherwise you're going around
It does.
again.
The stress I felt, and this is what I mentioned earlier about my partner Anne. She's been brilliant, but she could see me. I was stressed. I was so stressed with it. I actually had a wedding the weekend before down in Newcastle, and I was contemplating not going. And it was one of my friends, Chris, who said to me, "What are you going to do? Drive round your lesson plan. What are you going to do? You've done enough. You're doing too much. Switch off. Go down your wedding. Enjoy it." And I did. I went down to the wedding. Did enjoy it. Aye, had a few drinks. Good people. But every minute I had on my own, part 3, part 3, part 3, part 3.
Takes over your life, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does. It does. But I eventually had to switch off. I'd done enough. Went to the wedding. So it came back up the road. It was fine.
There we go. Give yourself some time to reset as well. I think reflecting on what's
Absolutely.
happening is
Absolutely.
important.
I think Bob Morton talks about that as well, your wellness. Look after yourself.
We have to. I'm seeing that at the minute. Going all the way back to the beginning of this episode, diary management, looking after ourselves.
Oh, I know. It's a nightmare.
Yes, it is. But what I have now, I mean, we could probably talk about more of the tips and advice. I think you've covered some really great information there. But I'd like to get some listeners' questions in, if we can, and gauge your opinion on some of these. Do you mind if we go through that?
Not a problem, no.
Right. So apologies if I miss anyone that has left any comments on here, but we'll work through these. So the first one, once the excitement passed after passing, what was your plan to grow your business and develop yourself as an ADI?
What was my plan? See, I'm no spring chicken. So the fact of going for audit training or fleet training doesn't really interest me. So what I'm wanting to do is just concentrate on giving good lessons. This is what I want to do till I retire, which is no long away. So that's basically why it sounds boring, but that's the plan. That's the plan for me. Just concentrate on giving people good lessons. Don't swamp yourself with people. Does that answer that question? I'm not sure it does it?
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to deliver good lessons. And I guess grow your business, that can be taken a few ways.
Grow the business. Well, eventually, we're a franchise just now, obviously. Eventually, I want to get away from that. And what I'm finding now, I'm getting less people. Couldn't tell you how many people I've had through the franchise, but they're all coming in through Facebook and word of mouth and things like this. So the business is growing because I'm probably doing it the right way. I'm teaching the right way. Word of mouth spreading. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Nice. So Drew's up your way, isn't he?
Who?
Drew Duffy.
Yeah. He's on. Him and Sean are on the. Sean O'Neill you had on as well.
Yeah.
The next question's no for him, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
but he doesn't know it's you. He doesn't know you're the guest. Maybe I should have put that out there. If you could rewind the clock by 12 months, what advice would you give yourself?
Work harder. Do more yourself. More books, more podcasts. Again, getting people in the back of the car. Everything I'd done for my part 3, I should have had that done for my first one. My first attempt. That's the best advice I can give. You'll get out of this what you put into it. Because of my
Nice.
first 2 attempts, I didn't put anything in, or very little in, so I got very little back.
There you go. It speaks for itself.
There you go. Can't argue with that.
So there's a question here, but I think that's been answered in the episode. But the next one, do you have a goal in mind beyond your current situation? And if so, how do you plan to achieve it?
A goal in mind. I've maybe answered this already, and it's probably, I mean, I can understand younger ones wanting to go for fleet training or doing, you can give lessons to kids, and you get hired to do it, fleet training or audit training. I'm not really interested in that just now. I'm just looking to, what my goal is, to build up a good business, give good lessons, and slowly wind down, maybe retire early.
Nice. An early
That's
retirement.
that's me. That's me.
And then there is another one. Where are we? I need to find this one. I came completely unprepared. I think you've answered this, but let's be specific.
Yeah.
So, what was the best decision you made to help you pass your part 3? But let's be more specific. What is one decision?
It's maybe not so much a decision. Owning why I failed. Owning why I failed. Owning the fact that I didn't work hard enough. See, if you decide you want to work hard enough, the stuff out there is easy to find. I didn't. So the fact that I failed my second attempt and I was gutted about it, and it dented my confidence, but owning the fact that it was my fault, I didn't work hard enough. I think that was the biggest thing for me. And then I had a clear goal what I was doing for my last one. Again, it's maybe not quite what they're looking for, but that I would say was my biggest thing. Owning my mistakes, working harder.
I think that's really important what you said there, owning your mistakes. From what we see online, often the people that fail, it's someone else's fault. It's
my fault.
The examiners.
So when I sat on here and I listened to Sean's podcast on your show, Sean O'Neill, you remember Sean?
Yeah.
I realised I'd done nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. And actually, he passed the same day I failed. And he phoned me when he passed, and I was over the moon. I was waiting to go for mine. It was a hard day.
I can imagine.
But then I was over the moon for him because I've been great friends with Sean, Drew, Chris, Jen, everyone that's in our group chat. I'm friends with them all. But I didn't work hard enough. I think the biggest thing was getting people in the back of the car, watching what I'm doing, putting yourself under that pressure of people watching you, looking for your mistakes, looking for you to do something wrong. That was the biggest thing, I think. Understanding the 17 competencies as well, that's an important one.
That's another episode in itself.
Oh, God, yeah.
I love it. So let's finish on a positive then. So the last question that we've had come in, what do you love most about being an ADI?
I think being self-employed. I'm loving the fact I'm self-employed. I love the job I'm doing. I say I've had no real difficult pupils, whereas I know other people that have, and I haven't. What do I? It's meeting new people every day, meeting new people every hour, meeting different people. All these people, I wouldn't say they become your friends, but they know you. And when you get in and say, oh, they're looking forward to the lesson today, that's a great feeling. There's not a pupil I don't look forward to. Every one of them I look forward to. Just now I've got a great bunch. Yeah, I would say being self-employed and getting to meet new people. I've always liked meeting new people. Even back when I was training in Tesco's, every week you'd be training new people. And you'd meet new people. Some would be great, some maybe not so great. But yeah, I think that's the thing about the job I love. I don't find it stressful. People have said they find it stressful. I don't find it stressful. I if I'm doing a lesson and it's stressful, something's wrong. Either I'm not right, or I've done something wrong, or they're too far, or I'm giving them the lesson too. That I've let them on their own too early, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Again, does that answer his question?
Yeah, he asked, "What do you love most about being an ADI?" And yeah, you've summed it up with two really important things that people need to be aware of coming in. Is that you enjoy the business and being
Yeah,
self-employed,
I do.
and you enjoy meeting people. And again, it can often get overlooked with this job, but you've got to be a people person. You sat in the car
Absolutely,
all
you
day
do.
one-on-one.
Absolutely, you do. And I find I get on with people pretty well. Um, and maybe that's why I've not had any problem with pupils. There's been a couple earlier on, but like you said, you're self-employed, you can get rid of them.
Sorry, I've got
See
I've
you
got a
later.
flat tire today.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the flip side to that. If you've got somebody you don't like, you're self-employed, you can do what you want. So far, I've not had to do that. That was that.
No, I very rarely have issues with students. I've had to
No.
be quite straight to the point with one student that I can remember. And it comes back to what you said actually about owning the result of your part threes, like owning the mistakes. I had a learner who wouldn't take responsibility for what was happening or
Mm.
anything really. It was always someone else's fault. It was always there's something somewhere, there was an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
excuse. And the conversation went along the lines of if we can't take responsibility for what's happening at any point, then there's no point taking lessons with me.
Hmm.
Where he is now, I don't know, but I didn't feel he was progressing with me. Either I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
the right instructor for him, or it wasn't the right time for him to learn to drive. Um, but yeah, we have
I
to own
think
it.
I think had early on I had to let one guy go. Now this guy was travelling down from Aberdeen. He was doing 3 2-hour lessons a week, spending a lot of money. But he was a security guard and he had a test booked about 2 months in time. And he was nowhere near ready. He told me he'd done 60 hours training. But what I discovered is a lot of that was on YouTube. So he'd never actually driven a car. And he was all over the place and but we were just getting nowhere. I mean, we'd done maybe 3 weeks of 2 hours, six, I can't remember how many lessons, and he wasn't even out in the main roads. And I'm trying to talk him into cancelling his test or pushing it back, and he wouldn't do it. I goes, we've not done parking, we've not done roundabouts. He goes, I can do this after the test. I goes, you don't get it. You've got to do this for the test. And eventually he goes, right, I'll just cancel all my lessons. I goes, you're not taking my car for your test. Okay, I'll cancel all my lessons. I'll find somebody else. Bye. See you later.
We do get it, and that is one of the challenges with
But that's been one, and
this
it taught
job.
me a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility going for a
Yeah.
driving test. And when students
Oh,
aren't ready, the conversation I have with them, because they see it as well, I'll go and I might pass the driving test. And if I fail, it's okay. I'll get some more lessons. And my response is always the same to them is that, well, what happens if you pass? You're not ready. You could get a fairly straightforward test route with no cars and
mm-hmm.
no issues and no complicated situations. So you pass your driving test. Then what? Because you can't drive safely. So
Yeah,
what's next for you? And it can be a scary thought if people aren't ready to go because
absolutely.
they might pass.
So I make them understand that the test's nothing to do with me. I'm teaching you to drive. I'm teaching you to drive safely. If you want to use my car for the test, then yeah, you can take my car, but only if I think you're ready.
Absolutely.
Um,
Keeping them
that's about it.
safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Some fascinating topics covered tonight. We've covered some ground, all of the qualifying process,
I hope that's been okay.
driving tests, business. Say again.
I hope that's been okay.
Oh, it's been really interesting, really insightful. And I hope the people that are listening, it'd be great to hear in the comments, either on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, wherever you want to reach out. Just let us know what you think of the episode. I think it's really important what you mentioned about the part 3 and how you prepared for it. Because, yeah, part 1, part 2, there's a lot that goes into it. But most people, let's be blunt, are here for their part 3.
Yeah.
And
That's the
it's
big one.
generally not the first part 3 they're doing. If they're, it might be, but on the whole, people like yourself start looking after failing that second one. And then
Yeah.
often it's too late for the trainers that you want to reach out to, unless they've got an online subscription somewhere or something. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I hope the people listening have. Do you have any final points for people?
Just work hard. That's been the theme all day. Work hard.
Yeah.
Put in the work. There's plenty of stuff out there that's free and subscription based. It's not a lot. Podcasts, books, YouTube, just taking as much information as you can. Work hard. If you can, if you're in test centres and you meet other PDIs, get them in the back of your car. Ask them if they want to do this with you, because it'll help you massively. I can't underestimate that. Putting you under that pressure. That's the best advice I would give. You'll get out of this what you put into it.
A great message. What a place to finish there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Really interesting.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed it and got something from it. Before you move on to the next episode, I'd just like to talk a minute about one of the projects I'm working on that I think could really benefit people within our industry, and that is Talking Send with Dr. Julia Malkin, MBE. And this is available on Patreon, or you can find it on Facebook as well. But all the videos and the membership are over on Patreon, and it's short videos to give you some insights and information on how you can help your neurodiverse learners in the car. We've got collections on ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and the content just continues to grow. So if you have learners with additional needs, or you would like more information on that, you can head over there and sign up on Patreon. And if you're enjoying these episodes, you can now support the show. I have set up a Buy Me a Coffee page. So if you're interested, you can head over there. It's just buymeacoffee.com/Mirrors Signal Podcast. And I hope you enjoy the next episode. Stay tuned. Back to them coming out weekly every Sunday. Thank you.